In the shadows of our digital world, a relentless shadow war rages. The battlefront, the gray zone between peace and cyber confrontation, where the free world clashes with its adversaries. Armed with both primitive sabotage and sophisticated cyber operations, our foes aim to destabilize our political and economic landscapes. But the tide is turning as we bolster our defenses and sharpen our capabilities. The time has come to shift from defense to offense. To not only respond to cyber threats, but to anticipate and neutralize them, implementing an active defense strategy that turns the tables on our opponents. This panel will dive deep into the realm of cyber and hybrid warfare, outlining effective strategies for outmaneuvering adversaries and securing a decisive victory in this pervasive digital conflict.
Well, first of all, what a great day of panels. Such amazing panelists and speakers who've joined today. And a big shout out to PISM for bringing us all together and giving us this space to collaborate. Well, we are in the midst of a very complex and pervasive cyber and hybrid war. Cyber terrorism is on the rise. It's happening in our very own backyards. APT attacks are targeting our critical infrastructure, undermining public trust in elections, and spreading disinformation. In parallel, modern warfare today is not just happening in the trenches and in the battlefields, but we're seeing AI and autonomous weapons and technology on the front lines helping us fight. It's one thing for us to detect and to respond quickly to cyber threats, but what can we do to be proactive, to stay ahead of threats and incidents of compromise, and to be able to identify vulnerabilities before the exploit? And so for the next hour, we are going to explore the art of winning in this very context here in the 21st century. So the first question to my panel is, it's going to be a broad question around what is the reality of today's cyber threat landscape? What are we dealing with? In general, would you like to start?
Okay, so first of all, thank you for the invitation. And as you can see, in cyberspace, the velocity of our actions are very, very high. That's why I'm, as a deputy, joining you today, because the commander has been called to the Prime Minister for securing some issues connected with the information. But answering your questions, I think that the most important thing for us to understand is that dual-use technologies are helping today to, first of all, support the communications and the systems and technologies that we are using on the battlefield and in the battle space. We say that the AI, the data science coming with it, the big data systems or big data analytics are the tools that are being used for us to secure automatic and autonomous data processing, and of course to deliver the platforms that the military, that the defense market or the operational commanders are requiring for their ordinary everyday actions. The Ukrainian conflict emphasized that those technologies are the key technologies that they will be used in the modern day conflicts. The question is that what will change in the future when we will provide AI as a general AI for the technologies and the defense market to be used? And we say and envision that the broad application of AI will be implementing collaborative intelligence and of course swarm intelligence for not only controlling the specific individual autonomous platform, but swarms of drones. We have those systems. Some of the research projects that have been already announced on the US side and of course China, they provide us with, let's say, an understanding or a futuristic view what will happen. But trust me, if we combine large data sets, satellite imagery, drones, high detail vision or automatic vision on the drones with software-defined defense, you will see new types of weapon platforms and, of course, weapon systems. This is the future, of course. And we say, again, that software-defined appliances are the platforms that can be used not only for defense or defending the systems, but also they are chances and tools for us, the cyber folks, cyber warriors, for altering, for doing the offensive side, so disrupting the systems. And of course, we are using a lot of software in that manner and AI to cope with the data that we receive, that we also process from the monitoring of the systems that we provide for the armed forces in Poland.
So you ask about the state of the cyber scene now, but before I go to the question, maybe for some people in the audience it's surprising why someone from Google, the company from maps, photos and search is sitting here. You must be aware that we are actually protecting literally the billion of users from cyber threats, which actually makes us one of the biggest cybersecurity companies on this planet. And what we see, of course, we see the growing number of threats out there in the internet. We see actors motivated by the very different aims. Of course, we see financially motivated actors, we see APTs and hacktivists. But what is very significant now is being mixed and blurred. Now we see, like, for example, APT actors, the state-sponsored actors, being motivated by financial gains. For example, North Koreans earning money for the government, yes, because it's a low-risk, very efficient way of getting money. Yes, so definitely we see the number of information operations, misinformation, disinformation, and it's always going, of course, parallel with the conventional operations and kinetic war. But let's also take a look at some a little bit more positive aspect. If we look how good we are in detecting these threats and realize that something is wrong with our infrastructure, our systems. A few years ago, it took us several dozens of days to realize that we have someone in our infrastructure. I'm not talking about Google because we are not hacked very often, fortunately, but I'm talking about the global statistics. This year, we have only a few days, above 20 days, to realize that something happened. We are getting better with our systems, and with the rise of artificial intelligence, I believe we'll be getting even better.
Right. I think I'm going to answer the question by first going from the meta level, which is that from a capabilities perspective, we have it's a patch quilt essentially of different capabilities that we have, but they're not totally tied together. At the same time, cyber, which I'm going to define as both what we think of as hacks against hardware, but also including influence or information operations like disinformation, right? Because a lot of that's also happening in the cybersphere together. And if you look at that, we're very bad at defending against it. But we do have all these little capabilities, but nothing to really tie it together. So is this really convergence of capabilities is where we're really lacking. And this is especially true when we're facing adversaries like Russia and China, where, for example, within the GRU, their office, if you will, working on information operations is literally across the hallway from those that are working on your traditional cyber attacks. But if you look at any of the Western militaries, we don't have that, right? They're seen as very siloed from each other, and a lot of times they don't even talk to each other. And so from a defensive posture, I think we're still continuing to play catch up, even though the war in Ukraine has obviously accelerated the speed of that reform. And also want to add that cognitive security is what we consider as sort of protecting your mind against disinformation or fake news, whatever buzzword you want to use. But we haven't really emphasized that. And if you really think about it, the cognitive security is the most important aspect that we have, because it ultimately affects our decision-making processes, so that when it comes to the other domains, land, air, sea, etc., it affects how we make those decisions from every level down. So we're not only talking about the military commanders, but we're talking about all the way down to the populace, right? So the civil society, the NGOs are working in this space, to the people, to make sure that they don't fall for it. And that's why I think cyber warfare, as of today, is very, very asymmetrical, and is also incredibly hard to defend against. Not only do you have these sophisticated software and technologies that we're talking about, but fundamentally, to protect ourselves against cyber attacks, it's about us individually and our digital hygiene. If you think about the Colonial Pipeline attack that happened in the US, that shut down, right, gas and fuel to the entire East Coast for weeks, that was because one guy at a company decided not to change his freaking password. Right? And so fundamentally, it comes down to how sophisticated are our adversaries at social engineering these passwords and taking advantage of something that, we're like, oh, well, it's just inconvenient for me to constantly change my password or have 8 different passwords.
Yeah, and social engineering was used recently at the casinos in Las Vegas. It took, one person to look up on LinkedIn who the head of marketing was for MGM, and then to call their IT department. So I think you hit a very important point, Evanna, around the non-kinetic effects of hybrid warfare that really stems from the cognitive, right? And so how is that impacting geopolitical relations?
So you've spoken about the passwords and the things that are very clear and very often used as a first line that is being breached, and that happens a lot, actually. And it's very important that we need to understand that the cyber warfare, as you said, it often affects, of course, the technology. So this is, for us, the technology often works. The technology is secured, but the weakest link is always human. The weakest link is always human, and I say that the cognitive domain and the cognitive warfare, it's so important, especially in 21st century, because the technology and the backbone of each and every domain, actually, at the moment, needs or requires cyber. We say that this is a backbone. Of course, the technology affects our interpretation of information, but we see, and I've discussed this yesterday, I was on one of the conferences, and we've spoken about the newly developed device that will help to identify which data or which information is actually misinformation and disinformation. And even if we would have such device, and I presume it would be a smartphone, just imagine how we treat the information taken, or what functionalities of such device we require just to make the validation of or acceptance of this information, is it valid or invalid information, for us to understand. And to understand the policies, I completely agree with your point of view that the Western countries, especially the highly developed militaries, they do not share the intel as efficient that they should share. A lot of data comes from the enterprise. The enterprise develops the technology, and they are sharing a lot of CTI for us to handle, to understand, to react just in time to secure the systems. because securing the systems is the first step. Defense is always, the second step. We need to fight over. And what we lack as Western countries, I think, is the ability to be eager, to use the active defense in order for us to sustain or secure our needs and our policies. And this is the things that we are actually seeing, that a lot of militaries are very afraid what could happen if they apply offensive, this is a very strong word, but active defense measures to secure the systems. Because, it's very hard to defend your system, to defend your way of processing the data without countermeasures or actively working against something. And this is the things we are already seeing in Poland during the hybrid attack on our eastern border. That's it.
I will start with, I'm really terrified that we are still talking about passwords and changing passwords, yes? I was born during Cold War, and I remember a lot of effort that was put to educate us about where are the shelters, how to avoid contamination, how to behave in case of contamination. Do we do the same now to educate our society, how to protect them from cyber threats, how to increase the cyber hygiene? The General Chmielewski will not come to everybody's house to update outdated systems, I hope, but generally are always invited. But this is, I think, this is the field that we have really a huge homework to do. In terms of threat intelligence and being active, of course, from our perspective, we have the active incident response ongoing in more than 80 countries. It means we have the first-hand threat information that, of course, we share with our partners to protect their platform. But reality is that still the active defense is a matter of maturity. We have still, at least looking at enterprise market, we still have situation when companies are not at this point. We are talking about changing password. We are talking about the second authentication factor for the authentication. And we are talking about the antivirus, and the way to the active usage of threat intelligence is unfortunately quite long. So again, this is of course also our job to educate and to increase the level of the awareness of the cybersecurity.
To piggyback off the General's remarks, one of the things that we have not really thought too much about is this notion of a cognitive infrastructure or a cyber infrastructure. And so I'll just use the cognitive aspect of it as an example. So in the past 2 decades, Western countries have not, especially since the end of the Cold War, basically stopped investing in information operations. Psychological operations was a dirty word that you couldn't really say until about 10 years ago. Within the U.S., for example, the U.S. government shut down the information agency, which did a lot of the active measures against the Soviet Union. And so those capabilities sort of just withered. But during that time, Russia, China, Iran actually went on sort of the offensive, and they were continuing their capabilities, and they built this massive infrastructure with, not only domestically, so think about the state-run broadcasts, but they're also in, especially the global South, they started creating these networks and outlets, right? Because in the global South, they didn't really have those. And so they said, you know what, we're going to be proactive, and we're going to fill the narrative vacuum with the stories and the values that we believe in. And simultaneously, they funded the training of journalists in the global South so that they were essentially molding these reporters into what the authoritarian version of a journalist should be. So when the Ukraine war started, they immediately latched onto these existing networks that they basically had proxy control over and said, hey, I need you to put out all these pro-Russia stories, to the point that still in Africa, and especially in Africa and South America, not only is Russia the #1 publisher of content in the Spanish language internationally, right? But around 70% of the population still have a very high favorable sentiment towards Russia. And that's where a lot of these third countries who are not supporting either side are, right? And so they were able to tap into that because they had years to build those relationships. Whereas for the West, we didn't have that luxury. So Ukraine, for example, you know, they can do this very short counter, like, hey, what Russia is saying about the Crocus attack, the Crocus City attack is simply not true. It was actually deep fake voice. They can really only counter it, but for them to actually invest in long-term campaigns that last 5 to 10 years, it's just nearly impossible for Ukraine and the West to do. And that's where we're sort of, you know, we're realizing that now. And I don't think it's too late to build up this infrastructure, but I do think that that's something that we need to be able to talk about a bit more openly, is this notion of defend forward.
I completely agree on the last thing, especially when we speak about the infrastructure, but not many people understand what is the cognitive infrastructure. It's not only one of the large social media portals. You said previously that to have people that understand how to prepare the information that will influence hearts and minds. We've done some of that when we fought in Iraq, in Afghanistan, but even thinking in democracy, having, you know, the society or the people that require as much transparency as we want, I think that the policy should be changed. We need to speak about the info ops more clearly, and we need to tune or prepare the people fighting in that domain. It is obvious that we need to have them and to recognize this. And I think that the biggest problem or the biggest challenge is that this is the domain of special services. And, you know, as much as counterintelligence and intelligence people or intelligence community works with this domain, they are required to be efficient and proficient in that preparation.
Yeah, and I think to both of your points, it's challenging because it's information can be somewhat elusive, and the source, the attribution, sometimes can get blurred. So, what is the role then of civilians and military to work together to protect critical infrastructure?
Hard question. Very hard. So in that matter, I will be the last one, okay?
I can start.
I propose.
I think when it comes to cyber, and this is why it's so unique from a lot of the kinetic domains that we have talked about today, is because 90-some% of cyber resides in the civilian space, right? And so it's hard to, and this is where laws of war also become murkier because you're not allowed to target civilians, but then at the same time, if your adversary is also using something like the internet, which is now a civilian public good, what does that actually mean for our ability to defend against it, right? And so this is where I do think that we need to work a lot more closely with civil society and with technology companies. The tension among all three of these groups is definitely something that we need to get over. But I do think there's already a lot of collaborative efforts out there that people don't like to talk about because it's seen as just bad PR for all sides. But I can think of, a good example right now is the U.S. government sort of in this quagmire because an American citizen who is a very well-known hacker, but runs a legitimate company, was targeted by North Korea. And he was hacked, and he was socially engineered, and he got really mad. So he said, well, screw it. I am going to hack North Korea back. So he turned off the North Korean internet for 9 days. So clearly it is possible to turn off a country's internet if he's one guy and he did it for 9 days. And it wasn't like after these 9 days, the North Korean government decided to bring it back. He just said, well, I think that's proportional to what they did to me, so I'm going to turn it back on, right? But this poses a very interesting question for the U.S. government, which is, yes, we may have these capabilities, but as a government, how do we actually respond to it, and how can we be separate from the attribution to an individual who resides within my country and who is a citizen of, right? And so there are really two options. One is that they can just simply work with him on tracking North Korean hacks and ransomwares and crypto scams and all these other things. Or they can simply say, you can keep on going down your path as long as you're not breaking any American laws, and we're just going to keep on doing our thing. And so this is ongoing, and I think it'd be interesting to see which road that the U.S. government takes, because I do think that is a good example for some of the ethical questions that are concerned.
From my perspective, it's not a difficult question. I think since 2009, after the Chinese APT hacked us in Aurora operation, we are actively watching and gathering information on APTs and cyber criminal groups by our threat analysis group, and we share this information, and not only with our defenders from the cyber army, but with everyone who wants to protect the fundamental values, democracy, human rights. So this is definitely how we cooperate, looking wider to the public-private cooperation. Even last year in Poland, we had a large-scale campaign to protect our election, to increase the cybersecurity of our NGOs, of our government agencies, political parties, committees, and so on. So this cooperation for us is something obvious, and we willingly cooperate to increase our security and safety.
Question back to you, Artur. Are large tech companies doing enough to collaborate with government agencies today, or is there more that's required?
I know that I can take from perspective of my organization. I know that we are actually doing a lot, and it's not up to me to judge if it's enough. I think we are doing a lot. If you look what happened at the beginning of the Ukrainian war, we provided support to protect. The Ukrainians did amazing job in these circumstances. Then we provided the help to protect their web pages, government web pages, organization providing help from being switched off by DDoS attacks. Let's leave the technical details. We enabled cooperation with the free Gmail account. So yes, we try to contribute as much as possible to protect the free world.
I'm going to pivot a little bit, and this question is for the general. Let's talk about lessons learned from the Ukraine war. What lessons have cybersecurity officials in NATO and the EU learned from the war in Ukraine? I just read an article this week that, Ukraine is the testing ground for cutting-edge warfare. And having just spoken with you, you said actually a lot of the tactics they're using are legacy tactics, stuff that they already had. And so talk a little bit about what has come out of the war that you've gleaned.
Of course, on classified level only, okay? So Ukraine, of course, is a testing ground for cyber, for sure, for CIS. They are working with dual-use technologies. They have proven that during the conflict, the 5G network or GSM network will still work because it's being used as an infrastructure for cognitive operations. So it's, for us, we presume that the other side, the Russian Federation, won't destroy the complete infrastructure. And it's very important that we also see that for strictly cyber ops, very interesting things that we observed was that not only the military and the intelligence community fought the war, but also the cyber guerrilla guys as well. So this was the first time when the public groups or people involved in IT, they joined together. Even we have found a lot of information in the media that the Slovaks, Poles, a lot of people from our, let's say, region here in Europe also supported their effort against, of course, the Russians. And it was very efficient. They've done a lot of stuff, securing and cracking a lot of systems, even in intelligence system. There was a very interesting and very funny cyber hack that was done for one of the systems, worldwide systems, and they've actually presented the data in official meme portals that they've done it, and they presented this on many occasions to prove this it was done and it was efficient, just to prove the Russians that they do not possess enough defensive power against those people working together as collaborative effort. So this was the first time, argument for having this, and the second one is that I think that the civilians, the people that are always on the ground fighting or living alongside the military, that they become intelligence sensors. They are the first stage of the information to be used during the conflicts. The applications and the, let's say, camouflaging the military within the electromagnetic spectrum of ordinary civilians is another thing that we are observing. We are having those experiences implemented in our communications. And just to be sure, of course, the technological or technology giants are here to help. The problem is always choosing which types of technologies you combine to secure your sovereignty within the complete system. And this is the intelligent thing to have or to do. So picking the technologies that you require for very quick implementation, but securing those parts that need to be in your hand to have complete control of the information flow and the cybersecurity.
And as you guys leverage AI, oftentimes AI helps defend from the bad actors or the threat actors, but they're also using that same solution, the technology, on the offense. So oftentimes AI has become that double-edged sword. What are your thoughts on how we can still use AI effectively without empowering the bad actors?
I think we should not think that bad actors will not use AI to scale their operation. They will, they do. But I would refer everyone who is interested in more details to the report we published, which is called Defender's Dilemma. We are convinced that the rise of artificial intelligence will actually empower the defenders and will increase our defending capabilities. At this point, the intellectual, scientific, and technical resources are being accumulated on our side and our competition side of course, the AI startups, which are actually working to improve the capabilities for defenders. And so far, we see the proofs, solid proofs for this. So let's take the advantage of this situation. The one risk which I see, we are going to implement the regulation around AI, and of course, this regulation are really required, and we need the regulation around AI. But if we do it the wrong way, we will actually limit the possibility to innovate for the defenders, while the offensive side will completely won't care about any kind of regulation. So let's be careful about this. And absolutely, from what I see at this point, the application of AI is giving the advantage to defenders, and I hope it will stay like this.
Interested in your take, Evanna.
Oh, I am of two minds about this. In general, broadly, I actually think of AI as pen, right, or a piece of paper. Like when they were created, a lot of people tried to prevent people from using pen and paper to write bad things or things that they didn't agree with. And that clearly has not worked. And AI is very much, the same way. But the caveat there is that while AI can be seen as like this neutral tool that can be used for good or bad, I think the R&D and sort of the development in AI now have inherently become political because of money that's being thrown in by the private sector and by the government, by everybody, right? And so there's almost now this inherent intent of I am going to develop the next version of this AI technology to achieve this objective. So by the time you have that objective in mind, then you're no longer neutral, right? And so I do think that sort of going forward, we do need to think about the intent behind the development. But the second aspect, too, is just like how we consume news in general, we also have to think about what is not there. And this is sort of the short end of the straw that the government always gets, is that there are a lot of AI companies, as Artur has said, that work to defend and to do good. But we can't afford the PR. So it's not like there are PR stories out there about how this company just defended against an attack, because A, that's not going to give you the number of eyeballs, right, and the clicks. And it's just not as exciting as like, oh, look at this thing that is going to invoke scary fear, anger, emotions in someone. And so I think when you're reading about AI development or any technology development, you also have to think, okay, what is actually not being written about?
In general, how will AI help us win against authoritarian adversaries?
To be politically correct, yeah. First of all, I also see AI as a tool. It's a very wide range of algorithms and, of course, methods for reasoning, for classification, for generating some content, and actually, when we haven't estimated the drawbacks that will be delivered to the market when we use generative adversary networks openly and widely, I think. And nowadays, we've heard about deepfakes, and this is the tool that everybody is seeing or even predicting it will be very harmful or can be used for of course, disinformation, for providing misgenerated or heavily altered content. And actually the problem with the whole content is that we haven't used watermarking technology or some kind of a checking or validation technology to cope with this type of content. At the moment, you've heard about the newly generated texts. It's pretty obvious, but the problems we are having is the video streams that can be produced, and the problem is actually the speed of content delivery. So if we are, as Denzel Washington said, first to deliver, this is the worst thing to have. If the media won't do the checking, the validation of the content that is being produced on social media or any other internet source, there will be a very large gap for, first of all, disinformation, for fighting against the people that are using this type of media stream. And I think for us, the AI is actually one of the tools that will govern the cybersecurity. It's obvious that we are looking for changes in data flows within the security equipment. We are looking for different anomalies in the information streams, and of course we are looking on the data that is should look at the data that is being produced by those applications you've described. And I think the very important thing to understand is that we should have people working in NATO to find those bright minds, those talented guys that produce those tools, and we need to figure out how to stop them on this incubative first stage and try to convince them that they should work on our benefit. That's it. And the problem with AI is that we, on many types of algorithms, we do not know how the people will use them if the tools will be provided to the market. And this is a very interesting thing.
With every new technology starting from internet, mobile, cloud, and now AI, we introduced new threats to our threat landscape. For every new technology, we have to revisit our controls and our risks and apply new approach to these risks. And of course, in parallel to development of the AI technologies, we are developing a lot of tools and frameworks to actually make it happen, like SynID, which is actually used for watermark artificially generated contents. But of course, we can provide these tools, we can provide these frameworks. What we cannot do, we cannot force everyone to use it. And it's the same with other technologies, yes? We can provide the technology, we can provide the means to protect from these threats. But what we cannot do, we cannot force people actually to use them. And here is the wide field for education and campaign to actually make people aware. It's also very true about the misinformation, disinformation. We cannot stop 100% of IO campaigns. Yes, we need people to apply critical thinking to what they see and information they consume.
And actually, this is a great area of collaboration, going back to your earlier question about how civilians can actually work with the military, is that every major company, including Google, they have red teaming teams, groups, divisions, whatever you want to call them. And their entire job is to make sure that the product that they have comes with guardrails, and that's not going to answer, for example, ChatGPT is not going to answer a question like, how do I make a bomb, right? And so they're constantly just stress testing, but that still comes from humans doing that work, and a lot of these people don't have the experience of being on the front line or, what happens during a war. And so this is probably a place for the government to come in and say, hey, have you thought about these questions that terrorists and whoever and our adversaries might be asking, etc.?
Just to add to this discussion, how important AI is for us at Polish MOD is our approach towards the AI, not only on policy and strategic level. I mean the analytical understanding how it works, how it can be used for developing the capabilities, but also, and this is our approach here, bottom up, is the implementation of AI within the data streams and our tools for command and control, for recon, targeting, etc. So we in Cybercom in Poland say that having engineers and analytics working bottom up with the tools that we develop, understanding the technology, is the way to know the technology, know how to use the technology, and provide the analytical outcomes for our decision makers. That's why and this is actually the second panel that it will be announced. Yesterday it was announced by our Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Defense that we in Poland are developing at the moment a completely new military unit responsible for the implementation of AI in Polish armed forces.
You heard it here from the Deputy General. I want to leave some time. We have about 10 minutes left for the audience to ask questions. All right, there are two gentlemen in the middle over there.
Thank you. This panel for me shows that technology moves forward. Human is always the weakest link. But just to link this discussion with the previous one about the axis of evil or axis of authoritarians, do you see the cooperation or partnership between some of these malign actors, China, Russia, North Korea, Iran? I would maybe add Belarus in the mix. In terms of exchange of experience, exchange of practices, maybe even outsourcing some of the tasks to a smaller or weaker part in this network. That'll be my first question. About the second, I would push on Evanna's point about the North Korea and the hacker. What would be your red lines or some, points that the government should not cross? Because I was thinking, why not using a deep fake technology against our opponents? Why not use the modification of information streams? Why don't do a character assassination on some people in the Russian or Chinese elite? Would that be still okay, or would that be a step too far from the government viewpoint? We know that some of the patriotic or democratic hackers can do that anyway.
Who starts?
Yeah, so the answer to your first question is from an information operations perspective. The axis of evil, I call them the RIC countries, Russia, Iran, China, and North Korea. I just combine them into RIC. But they are actually working together, and you can see this even back in 2014, 2015 in the Caucasus, where China and Russia especially, they were basically complementing each other's capabilities and also learning from each other's playbooks in the Caucasus. So for example, China before then was pretty bad at the languages like Georgian, Armenian, Azeri, etc. And so they kind of allowed Russia to write a lot of that content, but then they were using some of the Chinese networks there to disseminate, right? Increasingly, too, we're seeing a collaboration between Russia and Iran, for example, in South America, where they're actually co-publishing. So RT will take exactly the same content from TASS, which is the Iranian newswire, and then they will copy and paste each other. And if you look at the timestamps of their posts on Facebook and Twitter and Telegram, you'll see that they're basically within a few minutes of each other, but just in different languages. Okay, so we're definitely seeing that. And then to your second question, I think the problem is that when it's a democracy, the best example or the best simile I can give is, for example, when Nancy Pelosi went to Taiwan to visit, and the Chinese CCP was furious about it, and then they called Biden, the White House, and said, can you stop Nancy Pelosi from going? And he's like, well, no, because we're in a democracy. I can't do anything that another branch is going to do, right? Like, I can't control that. But to a lot of these authoritarian governments, the U.S. is a monolith, right? And everyone gets along with each other to a certain extent, but at least there's some kind of backroom coordination going on. And while that might be true to a certain extent, I think that's the problem, is that when an individual is going out and doing it, it might be seen as, oh, this had a stamp of approval from the government behind it, because that's the way they're used to it. And that wrongful attribution can lead to something that's above the threshold.
I will go second because I believe that General Chmielewski will have the most interesting piece here. Of course, as a Google, we are not a power agency and we are not doing any offensive operations. We are protecting our users, but we do something very important. When we see some category of threat, we try to eliminate the whole category of threat that is there. I can give you an example. Phishing attacks. We introduced, for example, physical second factor, and now in cooperation with other tech companies we introduced passkey technology, which I do encourage you to take a look, because it eliminates passwords at all, and it's really important, it's unphishable. So this is what we do. We have a large perspective of what happens out there in the cyber, and we see the really important threat. We try to eliminate the root cause within technology. That is exactly what we do. So that's the one question. The other question, I will be a little more conservative here. These are like secret operations. Yes, the APT threat actors, these are like secret operations. Very often the attribution in cyber is like one of the most difficult things to do, because we have to find by some very tiny things who is doing what. But very often they also pretend that they are someone else. So they're using the same tools. So the Iranian group can use the Russian tools, can use the same TTPs just to let us thinking that this is actually done by North Koreans, yes? We can expect, of course, that they are cooperate, yes? But also, let's be aware, all the tools they use, most of the tools they use, are there in the internet. You can download them, and I don't really suggest using them or even try to using them. If you ever looked what is on a darknet, you will see it's like a Amazon for a crime, yes? So, yes, I may suppose that they are cooperating, but it's very, very difficult in a cyber world to attribute to the actor.
So thank you for saying this. It will be very brief from my side, because it's very sensitive information. So first of all, as you said, from the information part, it's pretty obvious that the Chinese are requiring the people from that specific language region, that they need to have those people to work with the language, work with the semantics and the syntax of the language. And for us, it's pretty obvious how to identify people that, especially in Polish language, are not speaking good enough. But the technical part of the cyber attacks, it's even worse, because the TTPs can be used by different entities. And we say that, and I'm convinced that the major visibility of APTs are in your systems. The APTs are using not botnets, they are using ordinary cloud environments. So each and every cloud provider is actually one of the best sensors that can be used for our benefit. The problem is to arm them or help them to develop efficient ways of identifying IOCs and TTPs for our benefit. And I think that the major technology providers are at the moment working heavily on the CTI that can be, first of all, taken from their infrastructure and shared between the allies and all institutions to secure the systems. And this is working for our benefit. As a last reminder about sharing the information, just imagine, in Darknet, there is malware as a service and hack as a service. So you can imagine it's not so hard to pay for hacking, for malware, and this is completely different to dig up the zero-day vulnerabilities to use on your benefit. And for having 0 days and working with zero-day vulnerability is completely different, because not a lot of engineers and military or intelligence can work on that level of maturity and, of course, technology advancement. That's it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Ransomware as a service is a multi-billion-dollar industry today. So, well, can we give our panelists a round of applause?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much for your insight.
Susanna, could you please join us over here?
Sure.
Thank you. So you covered extensively the AI, and I wanted to ask you, what are the main takeaways according to you? Because we talked a lot about, like AI being a threat to us in civilian ways, and rightly so. But what about using it, like against our enemies? What is your take on that?
Yeah, I think at the very end, the general mentioned zero-day exploits, zero-day threats. I think AI is so important for the defenders, for businesses, government agencies to use it to be able to respond, to detect and respond quickly. So we're not letting the threats live in our environments for days, months, years. And that's how ransomware then becomes a big thing, and millions of dollars can be taken, and businesses and countries exploited.
Perfect.
Thank you again for moderating the panel.
Thank you.